The holotape whirs with a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It is a noise that belongs to the world that was, a mechanical ghost whispering in the shell of the present. I do not know who will find this recording. A scavenger, perhaps, picking through the bones of my final camp. A scribe from the Brotherhood, cataloguing the last words of a forgotten mercenary. Or maybe no one. Maybe it will simply turn to dust with me, its magnetic ribbon flaking away until my voice is as silent as the history it attempts to preserve. It does not matter. The act of speaking is the purpose. It is a final, desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos that has become my life. A life now tethered to a walking anachronism. A smiling calamity from a world that choked on its own hubris, and now, through him, threatens to do so again. I travel with a man who is 200 years late for his own funeral, and he is dragging the entire Commonwealth into the grave with him. His name, he says, is Nate, just Nate. He wears the blue and yellow uniform of a vault dweller, a costume of failed optimism that is so clean it looks like a wound against the grime of the wasteland. He emerged from the earth like a seed that had waited 2 centuries for a drop of rain, and he carries the placid, unburdened smile of a man who still believes in neatly trimmed lawns and the promise of a Nuka-Cola. I have seen that smile in the flickering light of a burning settlement. I have seen it as he methodically disassembles a man with a combat shotgun. I have seen it as he looks upon the irradiated ruins of a city and asks if they still make baseball cards. He is not a monster. Monsters have malice, they have intent. He is something far more terrifying. He is a tourist in the apocalypse, and he holds the power of a god. I met him near the old satellite array at Olivia. I was tracking a pack of raiders who had made the mistake of stealing a water purifier from a settlement under my protection. It was a simple contract, the kind that keeps a man in bullets and boiled meat. I had them cornered, a trio of twitching, chem-addled dregs whose world had shrunk to the next hit and the next scream. I was preparing to end their miserable existence with the cold professionalism that has kept me alive for 30 years in this ruin, when he simply walked out of the irradiated fog. He had a pipe pistol that looked like it would fall apart if he sneezed too hard, and a look of mild confusion on his face, as if he had taken a wrong turn on his way to a picnic. The raiders saw him, of course. They saw what I saw. Fresh meat. A walking collection of loot with no concept of the world he was in. They laughed, the sound wet and broken. They raised their own makeshift rifles. And then the world became a blur of precise violence. He moved with an economy I had only seen in ancient training manuals, a kind of pre-war ballet of death. One shot to the knee of the first, sending him sprawling. A second to the gun hand of the next. A third that ricocheted off a steel girder and struck the last one in the throat. It was over in 3 seconds. He did not use a VATS system. Not then. It was just instinct. A deep, cellular memory of a world where violence was a science, not a desperate, scrabbling act of survival. He walked over to the gurgling, dying raider, looted a few caps and a stale box of cram from his pockets, and then turned to me. He adjusted the collar of his ridiculous blue suit and extended a hand. "Bit of a rough neighborhood," he said, his voice utterly devoid of the adrenaline that should have been flooding his system. It was the tone of a man commenting on poor civic planning. I did not take his hand. I just stared at him, at the impossible cleanliness of his clothes, at the untroubled blue of his eyes. He seemed to notice my hesitation and gave a small, self-deprecating shrug. "Sorry, force of habit. Name's Nate. I'm looking for my son, Sean. Have you seen a baby?" A baby. in the Commonwealth. He asked it with the same sincerity a man might ask for directions to the nearest coffee shop. I told him the truth. I told him that babies in the Wasteland either die quietly in the dust or grow up fast and hard, and that either way, they do not stay babies for long. I told him that looking for one specific child in this sprawling graveyard was like trying to find a single untarnished spoon in the ruins of Boston. His smile faltered just for a moment. It was the first and perhaps the last time I saw genuine, unadulterated pain in his eyes. He was looking for a ghost, the ghost of a life that had been stolen from him. And in that moment, I felt a flicker of pity. It was a feeling I would come to regret. He explained his situation, the vault, the frozen sleep, the man with the scar, the stolen child. It was a story so outlandish, so steeped in the myths of the old world, that it had to be true. No one in the Wasteland had the imagination for such a tale. Our stories are simpler, written in blood and rust. Stories of hunger, of loss, of betrayal. His was a story from a comic book, a garish, four-color tragedy that felt obscene in the muted browns and greys of our reality. He needed a guide, someone who knew the lay of the land. He had caps, pre-war money, and a seemingly endless supply of fusion cells he had scavenged from the vault. I had a dwindling supply of everything, pity and pragmatism, a dangerous combination. I agreed to travel with him, for a price. Our first journey together was to Concord. The place was a charnel house, as it always is. The bodies of settlers were strewn across the street, their dreams of a new life torn apart by the local raider scum. He took it all in with a kind of academic detachment. He would point to a specific model of ruined Chrysalis and remark on its engine specifications. He would pick up a child's toy from the blood-stained dirt and wonder aloud what it might be worth to a collector. He saw the scene not as a tragedy, but as a museum exhibit, an interesting, if somewhat morbid, diorama of a fallen world. Then we heard the gunfire from the museum, Preston Garvey and the last of the Minutemen, cornered and making their final stand. To me, it was a familiar story. Hopeful people trying to build something, only to be crushed by the endless grinding violence of the Commonwealth. A situation to be avoided, a fight that was not my own. But Nate, he heard a damsel in distress. He saw a scenario straight from one of his pre-war comic books. The gallant hero, the besieged innocents, the dastardly villains. He ran towards the gunfire with the same cheerful determination a dog shows when chasing a thrown stick. What he did in that museum was not a firefight. It was an extermination. He found a suit of T-45 power armor on the roof, and when he climbed inside, something changed. It was more than just a man in a machine. He became an avatar of the old world's military might. The armor, which would have been cumbersome and slow on a normal person, seemed to move with him as if it were a second skin. He tore the minigun from its vertibird mount and descended into the building. I followed, not to help, but because I was mesmerized by the sheer, unholy efficiency of it all. The raiders never stood a chance. They were screaming, firing their pathetic pipe guns against the armored shell of a walking tank. He did not shout. He did not taunt. He just moved from room to room, the miniguns spitting a continuous stream of hot lead, chewing through flesh and concrete with equal indifference. When the bullets ran out, he used the armor's fists, pulping heads into red mist against the walls. He was not angry. He was not frightened. He was simply solving a problem. The problem was that there were people in the building who were not supposed to be there, and he was the solution. When it was over, he stepped out of the power armor, the metal shell dripping with gore. and he was smiling again. That same placid, untroubled smile. Preston Garvey was babbling, thanking him, calling him a hero. He handed Nate the title of General of the Minutemen, as if it were a party favor. Nate accepted it with a nod, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He had saved the day. He had rescued the settlers. He did not seem to notice the way Sturgis looked at him, with a mixture of awe and terror. He did not seem to care that he had just single-handedly altered the political landscape of the Northern Commonwealth by anointing himself the leader of a dead faction. He had completed the quest. He had gotten the reward. He was ready for the next one. That was when the first real seed of dread was planted in my gut. I had seen men kill. I had killed men. It is a grim, ugly business. It leaves a mark on you, a stain on the soul that never truly washes out. But Nate was unmarked. The violence flowed through him, and he remained pristine, untouched. He was like a pristine filter, processing the filth of the world and remaining utterly, terrifyingly clean. We traveled to Diamond City. He called it the Great Green Jewel, a name he must have read on some pre-war travel brochure. When he saw it, his face fell. He had expected a shining metropolis, a bastion of civilization. What he found was a shantytown built in the corpse of a baseball stadium. He saw the rust, the grime, the desperate poverty. He did not see the miracle. He did not see the sheer, stubborn refusal to die that Diamond City represented. He did not understand that for 100 souls to live in relative safety, with walls and guards and a semblance of law, was a monumental achievement in this world. He just saw a failure, a dirty, disappointing shadow of the world he had lost. His interactions with the people there were a study in dissonance. He would talk to Piper Wright, the crusading journalist, and agree with her desire to expose the truth. But he did not understand the danger she was in, the forces she was pushing against. He just saw it as a noble, abstract ideal. He helped Nick Valentine, the synth detective, and was fascinated by the mechanics of his existence. But he did not seem to grasp the philosophical implications, the fear and hatred that synths engendered. Nick was just a cool robot, a piece of fascinating old-world technology. He would walk through the market, his Pip-Boy clicking as he scanned items, assessing their value. He saw people not as individuals, but as vendors, as quest givers, as sources of information for his primary objective: finding his son. He was polite, even charming, in a detached, formulaic way, but there was no connection. He was a sociologist studying a primitive tribe, taking notes, observing their strange customs, but never truly seeing them as his equals. I tried to explain it to him. I sat with him at the noodle stand, the steam rising around us, and I told him about the history of the place. I told him about the CPG, the Commonwealth Provisional Government, the attempt, decades ago, to form a real unified government between the major settlements. I told him how it had fallen apart, torn to shreds by infighting, by greed, by the Institute's paranoia. I told him about the CPG massacre, when the delegates were slaughtered in the old council chambers, a grim lesson in the fragility of hope. I thought if he understood the history, the scars, he might understand the people. He listened patiently, nodding in all the right places. But his eyes were distant. When I finished my story, a story that was etched into the memory of every soul in Diamond City, he just said, "So the Institute, they're the bad guys then. Got it." He had distilled a complex political and social tragedy into a simple binary equation. Good guys, bad guys. He was looking for the man in the black hat. He had no capacity for the shades of grey that made up our entire existence. It was after we left Diamond City that his power began to truly grow. His Pip-Boy, that strange relic on his wrist, seemed to grant him a kind of precognitive ability in combat. He called it VATS. He would stand perfectly still for a fraction of a second, and then his movements would become impossibly precise. A headshot on a feral ghoul at 100 yards with a rusty pipe pistol. A grenade thrown to land perfectly at the feet of a charging super mutant. He was no longer just a skilled soldier. He was becoming a prodigy of violence, a virtuoso of death. And the Wasteland, in its own cruel way, rewarded him for it. Every raider he killed, every mutant he slaughtered, yielded better weapons, better armor. The chaotic ecosystem of survival, which ground down lesser men, seemed to bend to his will, feeding him, arming him, making him stronger. He found a laser rifle on the corpse of a Brotherhood patrol. He scavenged a suit of T-60 power armor from a military convoy that had been rusting for 200 years, and with a few hours of work, he had it functioning perfectly. He was a savant of technology, a man who understood the ghosts in the machines because he was a ghost himself. I remember the day we cleared the Corvega assembly plant. It was swarming with raiders, a veritable army of them. For me, it would have been a week of careful planning, of setting traps, of picking them off one by one. For him, it was an afternoon's work. He moved through the factory like a spirit of vengeance, a blue and yellow blur of laser fire and plasma bolts. He never tired. He never hesitated. He just killed. Afterward, I found him on the roof, looking out over the smouldering ruins of Lexington. The bodies of the raiders he had killed were piled up inside the factory, a monument to his efficiency. He was not looking at the destruction he had wrought. He was looking at a billboard on a distant, collapsed highway. It showed a smiling family in a Chrysler station wagon. The words, "The future of motoring," still faintly visible beneath the grime and rust. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "we were going to buy one of those. A Corvega, the new model. My wife Nora, she loved the color, that seafoam green." He was not talking to me. He was talking to a memory. I tried to say something about the raiders, about the people in the nearby settlement he had just saved from their depredations. I wanted him to connect his actions to the world he was in, to see the consequences, the good he had done. But he just shook his head. "It's all gone, isn't it? Just junk." He looked at the world not as a place to be saved, but as the ruins of a place that was already lost, his home. And everything in it, every person, every struggle, was just another piece of junk. This detachment became more pronounced, more horrifying, as we encountered the major factions. We found Paladin Dance and his patrol fighting off a horde of feral ghouls near the Cambridge police station. Nate was like a child seeing a new toy. The Brotherhood of Steel, with their gleaming power armor, their vertibirds, their unwavering ideology. They were a piece of his world, a direct, living link to the pre-war military he had served. He did not see the fanaticism in their eyes. He did not hear the xenophobia in their rhetoric. He saw order. He saw strength. He saw a clear, simple mission: preserve technology, destroy the abnormal. He joined them without a second thought. He excelled in their ranks. His pre-war military training, combined with his wasteland-honed killing skills, made him the perfect soldier. He would go on missions to secure technology from old-world ruins, which meant killing anyone who happened to be living there. He would participate in purges of ghoul-infested areas, never once questioning whether every ghoul was a mindless feral. To him, it was just following orders. It was what a soldier did. I argued with him. I tried to make him see what the Brotherhood truly was. I told him about their isolationism, their technological hoarding, their contempt for the people of the Wasteland. I told him they were not saviors. They were vultures, picking the bones of the old world clean and offering nothing in return. He listened, and then he said, "But their guns are really good, Kovich, and they hate super mutants. I hate super mutants. Seems like we have a lot in common." He had reduced a complex ideological conflict to a matter of shared enemies and superior firepower. Then came the railroad. We stumbled upon their safe house in the old church by accident. He was fascinated by them. The secret codes, the disguises, the clandestine meetings. It was a spy game, a thrilling adventure. He eagerly took on their missions, smuggling synths out of the city, creating new identities for them, fighting the Institute's courses. He was incredibly good at it. His talent for violence was matched only by his talent for stealth. But he never once seemed to engage with the central question of their existence. Are synths people? Do they deserve freedom? For him, it was not a philosophical debate. It was a game of cat and mouse. He would talk to Glory, the heavily augmented synth soldier, and compliment her on her minigun. He would listen to Deacon, the master of disguise, and laugh at his jokes and his constant fabrications. He saw them as interesting characters, not as desperate freedom fighters engaged in a war for the very soul of their species. He was helping them, yes, but for the same reason a man might help a stray dog. It was a nice thing to do. It made him feel good. It did not require any deep thought. The ultimate test, of course, was the Institute, the shadowy boogeyman of the Commonwealth, the source of all its fears, and the place that held his son. He found a way in, through the ruins of the CIT, a feat no one had accomplished before. He was driven, relentless, and when he got inside, he did not find a den of monsters. He found a clean, sterile, underground world that looked exactly like the one he had lost. White walls, advanced technology, scientists in clean lab coats. It was a paradise, a perfect, hermetically sealed bubble of the pre-war world. And he found his son, Sean. Not a baby, but an old man, dying of cancer. The leader of the very organization that had terrified the surface for a century. The man who called himself father. I was not there for their reunion. I was waiting on the surface, fighting off the synths that guarded the entrance. But he told me about it later. He told me with a strange, contemplative calm. There was no rage, no sense of betrayal, just a kind of weary acceptance. His son was alive, but he was also the villain of the story, and the Institute, the sterile nightmare responsible for so much suffering, was his son's legacy. Any normal man would have been broken by this revelation, torn apart by the conflict. But Nate adapted. He saw the logic of the Institute. Their mission to redefine mankind was, in its own twisted way, a form of progress. They were bringing order to the chaos. They were clean. They were efficient. They were the future. The surface world, in contrast, was a dirty, dying mess, a failed experiment. He began to work for them, for his son. He would go to the surface and carry out their orders, retrieve a rogue synth, eliminate a threat to their operations. He did it all with the same cheerful proficiency. He was now a triple agent, a general of the Minutemen, a knight of the Brotherhood, a heavy for the Railroad, and the chosen successor to the director of the Institute. He held the fate of every major power in the Commonwealth in the palm of his hand, and he treated it all like a juggling act, a fun challenge to see if he could keep all the balls in the air. I watched him become a monster, not of malice, but of apathy. I saw him lead a brotherhood assault on a settlement that was suspected of harboring synths. He marched at the head of a column of power-armored knights, his laser rifle glowing, and he helped them burn the place to the ground. He did not fire on the settlers himself, but he did not stop the others. He just secured the objective. A few days later, I saw him lead a group of rescued synths to a new safe house, telling them they had a chance at a new life. He saw no contradiction in these actions. He was just playing all the angles, completing all the quests. The breaking point for me was Quincy. We had to pass through it on our way to a target in the south. I told him I would not go. I told him to go around. He did not understand. He saw a ruined town like any other, a good place to scavenge. I had to explain it to him. I had to rip open a wound I had kept stitched shut for 20 years. I told him about the Quincy I remembered. Not the nest of gunners it is now, but a thriving community. It was one of the last true towns, a place with a future. We had walls, we had farms, we had a militia. I was part of that militia. I had a wife, Ilara, a son, Tom. He was 5 years old. He wanted to be a Minuteman when he grew up, just like the heroes in the stories. I told him about the gunners, how they came with military precision, with overwhelming force. I told him about the betrayal, a man named Clint, one of our own, who sold us out, who opened the gates for them in exchange for a leadership position. I told him about the fight, the desperate, hopeless last stand on the overpass. I told him about watching my friends die, about the screams, about the smoke. I told him about my last memory of my family. I had sent them to the church, thinking it would be safe. The last I saw of Ilara was her face, streaked with soot, telling me to fight, to hold them off. The last I saw of my son was his small hand, waving at me from the church doorway. I never saw them again. I fought until I was overwhelmed, left for dead in a pile of my comrades. I was one of the few who survived, the sole survivor of my own personal apocalypse. I told him all of this, my voice cracking, the memories like shards of glass in my throat. I wanted him to understand. I wanted him to see that these ruins were not just piles of bricks and scrap. They were gravestones. They were monuments to real pain, real loss. He put a hand on my shoulder. His expression was one of sincere sympathy. "I'm sorry, Kovich," he said. "I know what it's like to lose your family. I lost mine too." And in that moment, I realized the true, horrifying extent of the gulf between us. He thought our pain was the same. He equated his frozen, sterile comic book tragedy with my years of grime and blood and visceral, screaming loss. He thought he understood. He would never, ever understand. He went into Quincy anyway. He said he needed something from the pharmacy there. I waited outside the walls, unable to bring myself to step foot in that haunted place. I heard the gunfire, the rhythmic, efficient sound of his combat rifle, the explosions of his grenades. An hour later, he walked out, his bag full of chems and medical supplies. He was whistling. He had just walked through the graveyard of my entire life, killed the men who wore the uniforms of my family's murderers, and he was whistling a jaunty pre-war tune. "Cleared the place out," he said, as if he had just finished sweeping a floor. "Lot of gunners. Not anymore. You're welcome." He smiled that goddamn smile. He thought he had done me a favor. He thought he had given me vengeance. He had just desecrated a tomb. He had treated my personal hell as just another dungeon to be cleared, another location to be marked off on his map. That was the moment I knew. I was not his partner. I was not his guide. I was his companion. The game player's term. the non-player character who follows him around, who offers exposition and occasional combat support. I was a pet, a well-treated, useful pet, but a pet nonetheless. My history, my pain, my entire world was just background color, just flavor text to make his adventure more interesting. Now, we are camped here, in the shadow of the mass fusion building. Tomorrow, he will make a choice. He has told me his plan. He has decided which faction will win the Commonwealth. He laid it all out for me with the calm rationality of a man deciding on a corporate strategy. He weighed the pros and cons. The Brotherhood has the firepower, but they are too rigid. The Railroad has the ideals, but they are too weak. The Institute has the technology, the best chance to build a real future, a clean future, a future like the world he remembers. He is going to side with the Institute. He's going to use their power to eliminate the Brotherhood and the Railroad. He will become the new director, and he will lead mankind, as he puts it, out of the darkness. He does not see the tyranny in their methods. He does not see the terror they represent to the people of the surface. He sees a clean room, and he wants to sweep all the dirt into it. He will save the Commonwealth by destroying it, by replacing its messy, vibrant, struggling soul with a sterile, centrally controlled artifice. He will rescue us to death. He is asleep now, by the fire. His chest rises and falls with the steady rhythm of a man untroubled by conscience. His custom-modified plasma rifle lies next to him, within easy reach. My own rifle, a battered but reliable combat model I have carried for a decade, is in my hands. It is clean. It is loaded. The safety is off. I look at him, the hero from the past, the man who has killed hundreds, perhaps thousands, since he emerged from his tomb. He has wiped out entire nests of super mutants, cleared raider strongholds that have stood for decades, battled deathclaws and behemoths, and lived. He is, without a doubt, the single most dangerous creature in the Commonwealth. And he is a child, a smiling, cheerful, hopelessly naive child, playing with a loaded fusion reactor. What is the life of one man against the future of all of this? What is his stolen past compared to our stolen future? I have lived my entire life in the shadow of the old world's failure. I have seen what their arrogance, their relentless pursuit of progress at any cost, did to the world. And now, here is the living embodiment of that arrogance, poised to repeat the same mistakes, but with a cheerful, can-do attitude. He is not a villain. He is a walking, talking symptom of the disease that killed the world in the first place. To kill him would be easy. He trusts me. I could do it right now, a single bullet to the back of the head while he sleeps. No one would ever know the truth. They would say a raider got him, or he was killed by a stray deathclaw. His story would become another Wasteland legend, the hero who came from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The factions he has manipulated would fall back into their familiar patterns of squabbling and stalemate. The messy, brutal, imperfect world I know would continue. It would be saved from his salvation. But what if he is right? What if this broken, violent world is not worth saving in its current form? What if the only way to heal the patient is with radical, painful surgery? The Institute offers a future. A sterile, controlled, inhuman future, perhaps, but a future nonetheless. What do I offer in its place? The continuation of the struggle, the endless cycle of violence and survival. I would be killing a man who offers a cure simply because I fear the side effects. And what of me? Who am I to make this choice? I am Kovich, the mercenary, a man who kills for money, a man whose own past is a litany of failures and compromises. I failed to save my town. I failed to save my family. Now I am contemplating the murder of the only man who has made any real tangible change in the Commonwealth in years, all because I do not like his methods. Is this justice, or is it arrogance? Is it a desire to protect the world, or a selfish, pathetic need to make my own suffering, my own history, mean something? If his sanitized, ahistorical approach to the world succeeds, it renders my entire life, my entire struggle, meaningless. Perhaps that is what I truly fear. Not that he will destroy the world, but that he will save it in a way that proves my pain was pointless. The fire crackles, spitting embers into the night air. The ruins of Boston are a jagged black silhouette against a sky choked with the faint, green glow of lingering radiation. In the distance, a dog barks. Not a wild mongrel, but one of his. Dog meat. The animal is as unnervingly loyal and simple as its master. It sees the world in terms of friends and enemies, food and danger. Perhaps it is the sanest one of us all. I raise the rifle. The metal is cold against my cheek. I line up the sights on the back of his head, on the clean, ridiculously preserved pre-war haircut. My finger rests on the trigger. It would be so simple. A final contract, pro bono, for the good of the Commonwealth. My last act would be to correct a historical anomaly, to put a ghost back in its grave. I think of Quincy. I think of the look on Ilara's face. I think of my son waving from the church door. They lived and died in this world, this messy, broken world. They did not die so that it could be paved over, sanitized, and replaced by something clean and sterile and utterly devoid of them. They died defending it. They died for the right of people to make their own mistakes, to build their own future, however flawed it might be. He is not just a man. He is an idea. He is the idea of the old world, the idea that a single powerful hero can solve all the problems, the idea that history does not matter, the idea that the past can be erased and a new, better future can be built by force. It is the most dangerous idea in the world. It is the idea that led to the Great War. My finger tightens on the trigger. The fate of the Commonwealth rests on this single, small movement, to save it from its savior, to protect it from the man who would rescue it to death. This is my choice, my burden, my final terrible contract. The holotape keeps recording, capturing the sound of the wind, the crackle of the fire, and the heavy, ragged sound of my own breathing. Let this be my testimony. Let this be the reason why I cannot do it. The rifle lowers, its weight suddenly unbearable. My hands are shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer, crushing weight of my own impotence. Who am I? I am a footnote, a hired gun, a man who survived. Survival is my only real skill, and to kill him, to pull that trigger, would be an act of creation, an act of shaping the future. I am not a creator. I am a relic, a piece of the world he is so eager to sweep away. He stirs in his sleep, muttering a name. Nora, a ghost from his own past. For a fleeting second, the demigod vanishes, and all I see is a man, a grieving husband, a father who has lost everything. He is as much a victim of the old world as I am. We are just two different kinds of survivor, haunted by two different kinds of ghosts. His tragedy is just louder, more colorful, more effective. He will wake up in the morning. He will drink some purified water, eat a box of 200-year-old sugar bombs, and he will go to the mass fusion building. He will execute his plan with the cheerful, unthinking efficiency that is his trademark. He will remake the world in his own image, an image of a past that never truly existed, and I will follow him. I will watch him do it. My curse is not to stop him, but to understand him. To be the one person in this entire blasted wasteland who sees him for what he truly is, and to be utterly powerless to prevent the inevitable. This holotape is not a justification for an assassination. It is a suicide note, not for my body, but for my soul. The man who fought for Quincy, the man who believed in something, he died a long time ago. The man who is left is just Kovich, the companion, the witness. My role in this story is not to be the hero. It is to be the one who remembers the truth, long after he has rewritten it. The sun is beginning to rise, casting a sick, pale light over the ruins. It glints off the barrel of my rifle. I engage the safety. The click is deafeningly loud in the morning quiet. He is starting to wake up. He yawns, stretches, and gives me that same familiar, untroubled smile. "Morning, Kovich," he says, his voice bright and full of energy. "Ready for a big day?" I nod, my face a mask of stone. "Always," I say, and the lie tastes like ash in my mouth. The recording ends here. My voice ends here. But the story, his story, goes on, and I am damned to follow. The journey to the mass fusion building was, like all journeys with him, a surreal exercise in violent tourism. We walked through streets that were little more than trenches carved between mountains of rubble. Skeletons in business suits sat in the driver's seats of rusted-out cars, their bony fingers still gripping the steering wheel, waiting for a traffic light that had gone dark 2 centuries ago. He found this fascinating. He would stop to examine the brand of a briefcase or to comment on the architectural style of a collapsed office building. It was as if he were walking through a particularly immersive museum exhibit on his own death. We encountered a pack of feral ghouls, their bodies twisted into mockeries of the human form, their minds burned away by radiation until only a raw, screaming hunger remained. For me, they are a tragic, terrifying reminder of the fate that awaits us all if we are careless or unlucky. They were once people. Shopkeepers, office workers, parents. Now they are just monsters. I kill them with a sense of grim pity, a mercy offered to a creature that can no longer be saved. Nate kills them with the enthusiasm of a man at a shooting gallery. He uses a shotgun loaded with incendiary shells, a weapon he recently invented at a chemistry station. He cackles with delight as the ghouls burst into flame, their agonized shrieks echoing through the ruined cityscape. "Crispy critters," he shouts over the din, a line from some pre-war cartoon. He is not being cruel. Cruelty requires an understanding of the suffering you are inflicting. He simply does not register their pain as real. They are video game enemies, shambling targets that exist for the sole purpose of being dispatched in spectacular ways. Later, we stumbled upon a small hidden settlement. It was not on any map, just a handful of families living in the shell of an old bus depot. They had a small water pump, a few patches of mudfruit plants, and a wall made of scrap metal and hope. They were terrified when they saw us, their eyes wide with the fear of strangers. I held up my hands, showing them I meant no harm. I began the slow, careful process of negotiation that is the bedrock of survival in the Commonwealth. Nate, however, simply walked past their flimsy barricades, his plasma rifle held in a casual, non-threatening manner that was somehow more intimidating than open aggression. He walked up to their leader, a weary-looking woman with a wrench strapped to her back, and offered to trade. He had a surplus of purified water, a result of his obsessive need to build industrial-grade purifiers in every settlement he liberated. He offered them 100 gallons of clean water in exchange for all of their scrap metal. The woman was stunned. 100 gallons of water was a fortune. It could keep them alive for months, but all of their scrap metal was their wall, their homes, their future repairs. It was an impossible choice. She tried to haggle, to offer what little she could. Nate just smiled his patient, unwavering smile. "Look," he said, his tone reasonable. "You need water. I need junk. It's a simple transaction." He was not threatening them. He was not extorting them. He was applying pre-war economic logic to a post-war survival scenario, and the disconnect was staggering. In the end, they had no choice. They agreed. Nate, with the help of his Pip-Boy's inexplicable inventory system, took every last piece of scrap they had. He left them the water, as promised, and then he turned to leave. As we walked away, I looked back. The settlers were standing in their naked, vulnerable depot, their wall gone, their future stripped bare. They had water, but they were now defenseless against the next pack of raiders or mutants that wandered by. Nate had, in a single, friendly transaction, effectively signed their death warrant. I tried to explain this to him. "You just destroyed that settlement," I said, my voice low and tight. He looked at me, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "I gave them a great deal. They'll be hydrated for weeks." He could not see the second and third order consequences of his actions. He saw a closed loop, a transaction that was completed and beneficial to both parties. He did not see the larger system he was disrupting, the fragile balance he had just shattered. "They can always find more junk," he said with a shrug, as if the entire world were a single, endlessly regenerating treasure chest. Inside the mass fusion building, the true scale of his plan became apparent. The objective was a device called the beryllium agitator, a key component needed to power the Institute's reactor and, by extension, their entire operation. The problem was that the Brotherhood of Steel also wanted it. They saw it as a dangerous piece of pre-war technology that needed to be secured, kept out of the hands of the unworthy. So as we ascended the building in a creaking glass-walled elevator, we saw the Brotherhood arriving in force. Vertibirds swarmed the sky like angry metal insects, dropping off knights in power armor on the roof. The building became a war zone. On one side, the Institute's synths, teleporting in with flashes of blue light, their laser rifles firing with cold robotic precision. On the other, the Brotherhood, a tidal wave of steel and righteous fury, their Gatling lasers chewing through the synths' plastic bodies. And in the middle was Nate, and he was having the time of his life. This was not a grim battle for the future of the Commonwealth. This was the climax of his adventure story. He fought with a kind of joyful ferocity, his laughter echoing in the cavernous lobby as he vaporized a Brotherhood knight with a perfectly aimed plasma shot. He would use his Viates system to target fusion cores, turning the knights into walking bombs, and then cheer as they detonated, taking their comrades with them. I fought because I had to. I took cover, fired my rifle, and tried not to die. I was a soldier in a war I did not believe in, caught between two factions I despised. But he was a player who had reached the final level. He moved with a sublime confidence, a man who knew on some deep, intuitive level that he could not lose. The world seemed to bend around him to protect him. Bullets would miss by inches. Synths would appear to block incoming rockets. He was the protagonist, and the universe would not allow its story to end prematurely. We reached the reactor chamber at the top of the building. The beryllium agitator sat in its housing, bathed in a soft radioactive glow. And waiting for us was a Brotherhood patrol, led by the very man who had first inducted Nate into their ranks, Paladin Dance. Or, as I knew him, the man who was secretly a synth, a fact Nate had discovered and, for his own inscrutable reasons, kept secret. The confrontation was a masterpiece of Wasteland irony. Here was the Brotherhood's most zealous soldier, a man who preached the destruction of all abominations, standing ready to die to protect his ideals, unaware that he himself was the very thing he hunted. And here was Nate, his supposed friend and brother in arms, preparing to betray him, not out of malice, but because he had chosen a different team. Dance pleaded with him. He spoke of honor, of duty, of the Brotherhood's sacred mission. He begged Nate to see the evil of the Institute, to remember his oath. Nate listened patiently, his head tilted slightly, as if he were considering a complex but ultimately uninteresting philosophical problem. When Dance was finished, Nate just shook his head. "Sorry, Dance," he said, his voice casual, "but I've got to do this for my son." He did not raise his weapon. He did not need to. He simply pressed a button on his Pip-Boy. A trio of Institute coursers, the deadliest synths ever created, teleported into the room behind Dance and his men. The slaughter was over in seconds. The Brotherhood Knights were cut down before they could even turn around. Dance was the last one standing. He looked at Nate, his face a mask of betrayal and horror. "Why?" he choked out, his armor sparking from a dozen laser burns. Nate gave a small shrug. "You chose the wrong side," he said. And then one of the coursers put a single clean shot through Dance's helmet. Nate walked over to the body of the man who had called him brother. He did not look at the corpse. He just looted the unique laser rifle Dance had carried, remarking on its superior damage output. He then retrieved the beryllium agitator, whistling that same pre-war tune he had whistled in Quincy. He had betrayed his friends, murdered his comrades, and doomed a major faction to eventual destruction, and his primary emotional response seemed to be satisfaction at acquiring a new piece of gear. We were teleported out by the Institute, leaving the carnage of mass fusion behind us. We arrived back in the sterile white confines of the underground city. His son, father, was there to greet him. The old man, withered and dying, looked at Nate with a pride that was chilling to behold. He saw not a monster, but a worthy successor, a man unburdened by the sentimentality and weakness of the surface world, a man who could make the hard choices. Nate presented the agitator like a child presenting a good report card. Father placed a frail hand on his shoulder. "You have done it," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "You have secured our future. Now, there is only one thing left to do. We must cut the head off the serpent. We must destroy the Brotherhood of Steel." And so, the final act was set in motion. The Institute had a secret weapon, a relic of the old world they had repaired and repurposed. Liberty Prime, the giant communist-hating robot the Brotherhood had so painstakingly rebuilt. The Institute's plan was to use a synth infiltrator to turn the robot's own nuclear arsenal against the Brotherhood's headquarters at the Boston airport. It was a plan of such audacious, terrifying irony that only the pre-war mind could have conceived it, and Nate was the man to see it through. He did not hesitate. He did not question the morality of using a weapon of mass destruction against his former allies. He saw it as the logical final move in the game. Checkmate. He prepared for the mission with the same cheerful diligence he applied to everything, cleaning his weapons, stocking up on ammunition, and crafting a few dozen high-powered grenades just for fun. I watched him, my soul a hollowed-out cavern of despair. I had seen war. I had seen massacres. I had seen the worst that humanity had to offer. But I had never seen anything like this. I had never seen a man orchestrate an apocalypse with the placid, smiling demeanor of a suburban father planning a barbecue. He was the final perfect product of the world that had burned, a man with all of its technological prowess and none of its moral gravity. He was his cheerful, empty soul, returned to finish the job. The night before the attack, he found me sitting alone in the Institute's hydroponics bay, staring at the rows of perfectly engineered, soullessly identical plants. He sat down next to me, a bottle of pre-war bourbon in his hand. He had found it in Father's private collection. He offered me a drink. I refused. "You're quiet tonight, Kovich," he said, taking a sip from the bottle. "Thinking about something." I looked at him, at the man I had once pitied, the man I had almost murdered. "I'm thinking about the world you're about to create," I said, my voice flat. He smiled. It was not his usual empty smile. There was a flicker of something else in it. Sadness, perhaps. Or was it just my own wishful thinking? "It'll be better," he said. "No more raiders, no more super mutants, no more fighting over scraps, just order, a new beginning." "Your order," I said. "Your beginning. What about the people on the surface? What about their right to choose their own future, to make their own mistakes?" He sighed, a sound of genuine weariness. "I've seen their future, Kovich. It's Quincy. It's Concord. It's endless struggle and suffering. They had 200 years to get it right, and they failed. They're like children, squabbling in the dirt. Sometimes a parent has to step in and make the hard decisions for them." There it was, the core of his belief. He was the adult. We were the children. He, the man from the perfect, enlightened past, was here to save us from ourselves. He was not a tyrant. He was a paternalist. And that, I realized, was so much worse. A tyrant can be overthrown. But how do you fight a man who is only trying to help? How do you convince a God that he is not, in fact, divine? "Your world burned," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Your world, the world of parents and hard decisions, it set itself on fire. You are not a solution. You are a symptom." He looked at the bottle in his hand, then back at me. His eyes were clear. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm the only symptom that comes with a cure." He stood up, leaving the bottle of bourbon on the bench between us. "Get some rest, Kovich. Tomorrow, we change the world." I did not sleep. I sat there in the artificial daylight of the hydroponics bay, and I thought. I thought about the bullet I had failed to fire. I had spared him out of a sense of my own inadequacy, my own weariness. I had told myself I was a witness, a chronicler. But that was a coward's excuse. A witness who does nothing to stop a crime is just a silent accomplice. The attack on the airport was a vision of hell, rendered in atomic fire. We watched from a high-tech observation room within the Institute, the battle unfolding on a series of giant screens like some grotesque sporting event. Nate was not there in person. His part was already done. He had planted the device. He had activated the infiltrator. Now, he was just a spectator. We watched as Liberty Prime, the Brotherhood's own symbol of power, turned against them. We saw it raise its arm, not to throw a football-shaped nuclear bomb at some distant enemy, but to tenderly place it at the feet of the Prydwen, the Brotherhood's mighty airship. Elder Maxon's face appeared on one of the screens, a communications intercept. His expression was one of pure, uncomprehending horror. Then came the flash, a silent, searing white light that overloaded the cameras. When the image returned, the Prydwen was gone. The airport was a crater of molten glass. The Brotherhood of Steel, the most powerful military force in the Commonwealth, had been annihilated in a single perfectly executed act of treachery. A polite, restrained cheer went up in the observation room. The scientists and technicians clapped, their faces beaming with pride. Father, watching from a medical chair, gave a weak but satisfied smile. And Nate? Nate just nodded, a small, tight smile on his face. The smile of a man who has completed a difficult project on time and under budget. He had won the game. With the Brotherhood gone, the railroad was next. They were a much simpler problem. The Institute had known their headquarters location for some time, a fact they had kept hidden from Nate. Now they used it. A team of coursers was dispatched. There was no grand battle, no epic confrontation, just a quiet, efficient slaughter in the catacombs beneath an old church. We did not even see it. We were just given a report. All hostiles neutralized. The synth rebellion was over. And so, it was done. In the space of a few days, Nate had decapitated the two other major powers in the region. The Minutemen, his own faction, were left leaderless and adrift, a collection of scattered settlements with a general who now lived underground and answered to a different authority. The Commonwealth was, for all intents and purposes, conquered. Father did not live long to see his victory. His cancer claimed him a week later. I stood with Nate by his deathbed. The old man's last words to his father, the man from another time, were, "You did it. You saved us." Nate held his son's hand as he died, his face impassive. I could not tell if he was feeling grief or satisfaction or anything at all. He's the director now. He runs the Institute. He sits in his father's chair, in a clean white office, and he looks at the Commonwealth through a series of monitors. He dispatches synths to deal with problems. A raider gang gets too bold. A squad of synths teleports in and eradicates them. A settlement suffers from a blight. A team of roboticists arrives with a solution. He is bringing order. He is fixing things. The surface world is changing. It is becoming quieter, safer, cleaner. The fear of the Institute is being replaced by a kind of grudging dependence. They are the new government, a government that rules from the shadows, that solves your problems before you even know you have them. There are no more town meetings. There is no more messy democracy. There are only directives from the man underground. And I am still here. He has given me a room in the Institute, a comfortable, sterile white box. He calls me his advisor, his conscience. He will come to my room in the evenings, and he will tell me about his day. He will talk about increasing crop yields in the Abernathy farm, or about the new model of synth he is designing, one that is stronger and more efficient. He asks for my opinion. He wants my approval. He still sees me as his friend, his partner. I am his last link to the world he has conquered. I am the one person who remembers where he came from, who he was. I am his pet historian, the tame, toothless embodiment of the past he has rendered obsolete. He keeps me here not as a conscience, but as a trophy. I am the proof that he has won, that his new world is so persuasive. It has even tamed a cynical old mercenary like me. But I am not tamed. I am waiting. I am watching. I am recording these holotapes, my final act of defiance. I am documenting the slow, quiet death of the Commonwealth, the death of its freedom, of its chaos, of its soul. He has not saved the world. He has placed it in a beautiful, sterile, airtight coffin. Last night, he showed me his grandest project. It is a new generation of synths, not just soldiers or workers. These are designed to be leaders, mayors, doctors, scientists. He's planning to slowly replace the key figures on the surface, to guide humanity, as he says, more directly. He believes it is for their own good. They will not even know they are being led by machines. It is the final, perfect, paternalistic solution. I looked at the schematics, at the plans for this silent, bloodless coup, and I knew that my time for waiting was over. The witness must at last become an actor. I have a plan. It is a desperate, suicidal plan. The Institute has a self-destruct mechanism, a failsafe built around the nuclear reactor that powers the facility. It can be activated from the director's terminal, his terminal. He trusts me completely. He has given me full access to his office. He thinks I am helping him write his memoirs, to document his grand achievements for posterity. He does not know that I am writing his obituary. Tonight, I will go to his office. I will access his terminal, and I will start the reactor countdown. It will not be a quiet death. It will be a second atomic fire, tearing a new hole in the heart of the Commonwealth. It will kill everyone in this facility. It will kill me. It will kill him. It is a monstrous act. I will be killing hundreds of scientists, people who, in their own way, believe they are doing good. I will be destroying a wealth of knowledge and technology that could, in the right hands, genuinely help the world. I will be creating a new crater, a new glowing sea, a new source of poison for the surface. But I will also be destroying the idea of the single perfect solution, the idea of the benevolent, all-powerful Father who knows best. I will be returning the future of the Commonwealth to the people of the Commonwealth. I will be giving them back their right to fail, their right to struggle, their right to be human. It is the only gift I have left to give them. This is the last holotape. If it is ever found, let it be known that I did not do this out of hatred. I do not hate Nate. I pity him. He is the loneliest man in the world. A man who has lost his time, his family, and finally, his humanity. I do this out of a desperate, ragged love for the broken, messy, imperfect world he tried to save. A world where a man's pain means something. A world where history cannot be erased. A world that deserves to write its own ending, even if that ending is a tragedy. My name is Kovich. I was a mercenary. I was a husband. I was a father. And I was a witness. Now, I am a choice. The last terrible choice of a world that refused to be rescued.